Good afternoon and welcome to the RIBA President-elect candidate hustings. My name is Albena Atanasova and I'll be chairing today's event. I'm an RIBA chartered member and an associate architect at Scott Brownrigg. First of all, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I hope you're well and safe wherever you are in the world. Today we have a panel of 5 candidates for the role of President-elect. The aim of this event is to hear from all candidates and to ask questions that are important to you, the student and associate members. This year is a very special moment because this is the first time the student members have been enabled to vote for the President-elect. I know this in detail as former Vice President for Student and Associate Members on National Council. I lobbied for 4 years to reform the reform the election governments to ensure the students have a voice about who would be leading the profession. In case you don't know, there is 17,022 student and associate members currently, making up 36% of the total membership. So I'm very happy that this year the student voice will count more than ever. I also want to mention the RIBA Future Architects Initiative to let you all know that there is dedicated support and resources for students and associates as you progress towards qualification. Make sure you check it out on the RIBA website. So, some rules for today's event. Shortly, I'll invite the candidates to introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to questions. I'm afraid we're not able to invite you to ask your question in person, so please submit any questions using the Q&A function. To ensure the process is fair, questions will be posed to everyone. Candidates will have 1 minute each to answer, and then we'll rotate the order of the speakers. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as we can in the time available, so please be as succinct as possible. We can't accept anonymous questions, so please give your name, membership status, and your location. For example, Janet Smith, student member, London. You can include and edit your name in the chat box. The 5 candidates are ready for a good debate. So please submit your questions, but be mindful of the tone and the relevance. Questions will be verified to ensure that they are within the election rules and appropriate to publish. We are recording, so for those of you who can't join us live, you'll be able to access the video and watch it afterwards. We hope the technology will work for us today, but if we have any problems, we'll do our best to continue, and if that becomes impossible, we will contact you all and reschedule. I also want to mention we're supported today by Kate, who is producing the event and whose voice you may hear in the background if we encounter any technical issues. We'll aim to finish for 1:30. So without further ado, let's begin. I invite each candidate to take 2 minutes to introduce themselves and tell us about their focus for students and associates as part of their President-elect manifestos. Our first candidate is Simon Alford. Simon, please unmute yourself. 2 minutes starts now.
Hi, I'm Simon Alford. I'm an architect with offices in London, Bristol and America. I set up my practice with my colleagues from university, which I think is relevant to today's conversation. As Albena said, you have a very significant voice in this election as students, but of course, very soon in the real frame of time, you'll all become architects. Or some of you will choose to become architects and some of you will go on to do other things. I think that's the wonderful thing about architectural training. You end up diversifying into the wider industry, whether working in construction or as a filmmaker or a writer or as a teacher. Our practice was founded in academia, so I studied at Sheffield and then at the Bartlett, and me and my 3 partners worked there as students and then set up our office a couple of years after leaving when we got our Part 3s. The RIBA, thanks to Albena and others, has opened this election to you, which I think is great, but part of the reason they've done that is you don't have to join the RIBA. It's an entirely voluntary act on your behalf. You can practice architecture without being an architect. We only protect title. So why join the RIBA? Why does this election matter? Why are any of us standing? I'm standing because I think it's really important that architects have a collective voice, a broad and diverse voice, and I think the RIBA doesn't do enough to capture that diversity. So what do we need to do? Well, first of all, in education, we need to develop affordable pathways. So when I was a Vice President for Education, I set up teaching practices. I'm now a chair of the London School of Architecture. We also support Sheffield's outreach programme. So to me, this election and the future is about you getting involved in the RIBA to help us all build a smarter, better, low carbon world. Thank you.
Time. Perfect. Thank you, Simon. We're over to candidate number 2. So let's hear from Jude Barber. Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Alvena. Yeah, I'm Jude Barber. I'm an architect and director at Collective Architecture based in Glasgow and Edinburgh. Some of you might know we're an 100% employee-owned and controlled practice, and I've been a director for 15 years in the office there. We're founded on principles of sustainability, creative freedom, and equality, and that's embedded into absolutely everything that we do. We've been employee-owned for 13 years, which means that every single person in the practice, regardless of their age or their role, is an equal owner and shares the intellectual and creative ownership of the business. In parallel with the work that I do in the studio, I've co-initiated a number of self-initiated change-making projects, which have included things like Voices of Experience, which is an investigation into women's voices in architecture and intergenerational learning. The Empire Cafe, which was a national conversation in Scotland around the Commonwealth Games, which brought into focus Scotland's role in transatlantic trading and slavery. And a new chapter, which brought about significant reform at the RIES, and we've just elected our youngest ever president. So I'm now on the RIS Council, and I'm a member of the RIBA Architects for Change, does incredible work regarding in the world of diversity and inclusivity. And I'm standing because I think what we do is so important, and it affects everybody right now. I've talked before in my statement about the health crisis and the climate emergency and how this has been brought into sharp focus. So more than ever before, the RIBA needs to be a federation of architects across the country for everybody at every stage in their career. And we need to respond to these issues with urgency and unity, actually, to ensure stronger relationship between practice and education, and ensure that we empower everyone to be more resilient, more responsible, more ingenious, and create a profession that's more inclusive for everybody in society. Thank you.
Time. Thank you, Jude. Going swiftly today. So our next candidate, number 3, is Nick Moss. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Hi, I'm Nick Moss. I'm pretty sure what's on your mind are things like climate emergency, equality and diversity, mental health, and a decent income. Me too. But there's a fundamental problem choking our ability to make progress. It's marginalised us to the point where we have little influence to empower the things that matter to us. The issue is procurement. In a nutshell, it's about how we get employed and the methodology of construction. I don't have enough time right now to explain the full detail of modern contracting to you now, but if you'd like more information, please do go to my website. But it urgently needs reform, and will probably have the greatest impact on your future as an architect and all the things you care about. Procurement is squeezing our influence into a state of non-existence. It's a cycle of deteriorating service that's impoverishing our built environment. The tragedy of Grenfell has shown procurement's race to the bottom can have catastrophic results. For young architects, it means pressure, stress, low salaries, long hours, and little control over your projects. I'm going to cut through the current deadlock and use the resources of the RIBA to fight for reform that will ensure a better future for ourselves and society. My new code of procurement will put the architect back into an influential position. Then we can't be forced to compromise anymore. We can work on the things that matter, like climate change mitigation and safety. It also means better fees, giving practices the breathing space to be more diverse, take better care of its employees, and be ambitious in creating a sustainable future. I want a future for my practice and many thousands of others who'll be your future employers. I want a future for you. Join me.
And that's time done. Thank you, Nick. Up is our next candidate, Valeria Petty. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Hi, I'm Valerie Petty. I was born in Italy and I studied architecture in Florence. I'm a conservation architect, passionate about heritage and regenerative design. I live and work in Nottingham, where I've been a grassroots activist, engaging and listening to the concern and aspiration of architects, students and associates for over 10 years. My involvement with RIBA is recent. I was with Central RIBA is recent. I was elected VP membership 3 years ago. But I have been working at the highest level on board and council, where I have used my experience and as an international diplomat and knowledge of our membership to further the interest of members. I have the knowledge and track record to make things happen, and I know how to work effectively within the RIBA decision-making structure. I strongly believe whether you're a student, associate, chartered member, you need to be given the time and respect and have your voice heard. As Vice President membership, I've initiated programs to make the RIBA increase its two-way communication with all members, national and international. And I've opened committees and meetings to students and associates. I was one of the first supporters of the Future Architect Network, which became RIBA Future Architect. I worked hard with the nation and region team to make sure it stayed with our regional network. I stand for the decentralization of resources. As the regional team at the first point of contact for students and associates and members, and we need to increase the support and activity they can offer. I have supported and advocated a mentoring scheme and educational groups at regional level for a great participation of students and associates in the decision-making process. I'm working on the creation of an enhanced mentoring scheme for established professionals to support associates who choose an alternative route into the profession. This is particularly relevant in the aftermath of the pandemic. I stand for the RIBA that must be about participation, collaboration, engagement, connection. And I am the person to deliver that. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria, as well. So we're over to our final candidate. Last but not least, Sumita Singha. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Hello, everyone. I've been teaching for 30 years. I've taught in 3 different countries and several universities in the UK and abroad. 2 years ago, I declared that I'd like to refer to students as future colleagues. So welcome to my future colleagues today. I'm the author of 5 books that are being used by the schools of architecture. I'm proud to say that my book, Architecture for Rapid Change and Scarce Resources, has been adopted for licensed design professionals in the UK. I've had some wonderfully diverse Part 2 colleagues in my practice, Ecologic. My practice is an equal opportunity practice. I set up RIBA's Equality Forum, Architects for Change, which included a student group. These times are tough. Those in studies were going through tough times even without the pandemic. So last year, I organized a meeting at the RIBA to look into some urgent matters. The existing system does not make it easy for you. Architecture is currently exclusive due to the cost, the length and the intensity of the course. Those from non-traditional backgrounds are marginalized. The validation criteria are not diverse enough to cater for the UK, let alone the world, where the RIBA validates many schools of architecture. On top of everything, the expectations of you as architects are very different from what you actually study. The codes of practice and the curriculum are not aligned, so you're expected to know about business matters, but this subject is not taught at university. I want to energize architectural education by using collaborative learning digital platforms, diversifying architectural education, ensuring that chartered practices have an equal opportunity policy. Without you, the RIBA will not exist. Without you, the profession of architecture will not exist. You matter, so I hope you can support me so that I can support you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Sumita done as well. So thank you all to all our candidates. It was very interesting to hear your statements. Now we're going to move on to the questions. So I will pose the first question and then we'll see what we have coming in through the chat and then we'll pick up some questions from there. So question number one will be answered by Jude Barber first. So the question is, what will you do to improve access to architectural education for all? Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you. Good question. Well, ultimately, the purpose of education and learning is to be the best you can be, to be the best architects we can be to serve society. And we can only do that if we best represent society and have a broad range of skills. I think at the moment, the current model is a challenge. It's long and it's expensive. And we have to remind ourselves that that wasn't always the case. In some countries, particularly in Europe, access to education is free and open to all. But currently, that's not the case here. And what does hinder many people is obviously the affordability of that. And that in itself restricts social mobility, it restricts diversity. So we need to develop new pathways and models, and we need to stand up for, you know, all of the RIBA members on council to champion the actions of students around the country. Thank you.
Time. Nick, you're next. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Just carrying on from the last conversation, I think it's absolutely correct that going into our profession has become elitist. And I think that's mainly down to the expense of studying. It's so long, but then also the dreadful, dreadful salaries of when you come out. So putting that investment into your education is not giving you a reward. My experience as a practice owner is that the numbers don't lie. Statistics are clear. General salaries have declined nearly 20% in the last decade, with little prospect of getting better. And that was in the so-called good times, let alone in a post-COVID world. And to actually be able to go into this profession, we actually have to be effective, but we also have to exist. At the moment, there's already reports of practices cutting their fees in half. It's terrifying. The AJ saying 10% of firms will go under. I'm like a broken record, but we have to reform the method of how we employ.
Just unmute yourself, Albina.
Apologies, I've been muted. Nick, thank you very much. Valeria, you're up next. Valeria, your 60 seconds starts now.
Yes, what we need to enhance accessibility to alternative paths to qualifications. Apprenticeship should be encouraged and widely advertised to practices and students. Currently, the schemes they're running tend to focus on London, leaving the rest of the country excluded from the possibility to participate. We need to start engagement at school. Not many people, especially from underprivileged background, think that they can have a career in architecture. So we should start at school with explanation of all the possible paths to becoming an architect. We need to support the students once they start their path into architecture with discounts and subsidies. This has been particularly highlighted during the recent pandemic, when students have been left in having to find their own resources for computers and programs that would normally be accessible at school.
Valeria, time's up, unfortunately.
Thank you.
So next up is Sumita. Sumita, your 30 seconds starts now.
Thank you very much, Albina. So I want to do at least 4 things. There's 2 years to go, so I want to achieve 4 things there. So first, as I said, I want to diversify education, so it's broadened to everybody's needs, and also globally as well. And secondly, I want to have different ways of offering education. So apprenticeship is one of those, and I want to really push for that. And I also want to offer flexible ways of studying, so which are good for people who are working part-time, who are parents, got young children, so on and so forth. And finally, as I said before, I want to open up digital ways of collaboration and teaching, which makes education accessible for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. And last but not least, we're moving on to Simon. Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
I'm very confident as I travel around the schools as a teacher, as a critic, that architecture is safe in your hands. You care about the climate and you care about design. I'm more worried that the RIBA is something you won't care about. So I find most young architects I meet don't care about the RIBA. The RIBA needs you more than you need it. So what I believe is we need to create an accessible profession, a profession that becomes diverse and represents our society. Then it can better serve our society. You are learning about design, design, design. The government is talking about build, build, build. Your job in the future is to join the institute, challenge it, and take the profession in the direction you want to take it to. So my ambition as someone who employs 500 architects is that you will be able to take architecture to new and better levels and build the low carbon world. The RIBA needs you to get involved. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all our candidates so far. So we're now going to start looking at some of the questions coming through the live Q&A. So the first question I've got for you here is coming from Suleiman Al-Sadi, who's a student member from Bristol. Suleiman's question is, architecture graduates are amongst the lowest paid in our industry. What do you do in your practice to promote fairer pay for graduates? And what will you do as our president to promote fairer pay in the industry? So this time we're going to begin with Nick Moss. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
I'm not going to sugarcoat this, and I'm probably going to say things you don't want to hear. It repeats what I just said about salaries. Salaries are going down in real terms, 17.5% in the last decade. The profession as a whole is in jeopardy, and we need to address the bigger structural problems as to why salaries are so poor. And it isn't just for graduating architects, it's for every single person in the profession. So we have to change the way we work. We have to raise up the value chain. We have to reposition ourselves to be much more influential and to come in from the margins. Only then will we start to see salaries improve. If it continues as for another 10 years, being an architect will no longer make sense. We have to act now.
Thank you, Nick. Next up is Valeria. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Well, this is a question that comes up over and over again whenever I engage with our students and associates, and I think is multifactorial. We need to change the education system and strengthen the relationship between education and practice so that our student can have a better start of their career with the knowledge that is expected of them and the benefits that they can bring to practice. So it will benefit everybody if that was achieved. The other side is the fact that we have been marginalized in our profession. The RIBA has got a responsibility to help us re-emerge from this marginalization. And that is to show the value of good architecture and the value that architects can bring to the built environment in terms of benefits to our community, well-being, mental health, and climate. The climate emergency that we are all trying to solve could start from making the public, bringing the public with us to make them understand the importance of architects and architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Next up to answer the question is Sumita. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you very much for asking that question. It's a very good question. So what I've done in my practice is I've always given students really well over the RIBA recommended salaries. In fact, there was one time I actually paid the student more than I was actually getting paid myself. This was a student from South Africa, I remember. But one of the things I've suggested earlier on is to have an equal opportunities policy and to operate on the basis of fairness and transparency so that you can see where you're going. So there are sort of gender pay gaps, there are ethnicity pay gaps in the practices, and you can see that. So before you choose the practice, be careful which practice you're going to be employed in. And finally, be aware of promotion opportunities within the practice to try and move up the scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. Over next, we've got Simon Alford. Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
As a practice, we've never really seen a distinction between academe and practice. We came from university, we set up together, we've always taught, we teach at half a dozen schools now in England and around the world. To me, the most important thing is to set up methods to support all architects, not just students. So yes, we helped set up the apprenticeship programme. We have diversity initiatives. We're supporting programmes at the LSA and at Sheffield. We've got students on part-time courses. We've got students full-time. Of our 500 staff, 300 of them came to us as students and have moved through the business. We're employee-owned, so they all own the business. So to me, it's not doom and gloom. We don't fulfil the architectural prophecy of failure. Be ambitious, demand more of your employers, and garner the respect that we need. Never work for free.
And that's time for the first question done as well. Next, we've got Jude Barber. Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned at the start, we're an employee-owned company, and transparency and openness is at the kind of heart of everything we do. I was shocked reading the 2019 AGA student survey, which told a story in itself. One of the key things that people were concerned about was fairness in terms of they're currently working low pay and long hours. This is systemic within the industry. We've got equal ownership. We've got an open pay scale. Everyone knows what I get. My salaries get reviewed the same way as everybody else. We benchmark that across the studio. We talk about money all the time, be open and transparent as possible. And actually, we encourage everyone to take ownership of the business in terms of making money and being innovative and running the business. And that's key to encouraging increases. The RIBA itself, I think, needs to take very clear stance on low pay and no fee, no salary working. We need to demand better working conditions, flexible working, and close those very, very acute gaps in terms of gender and class and access. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. We're going to move over now to the next question. So the next question comes from Victoria Adegoke, who's an associate member from Manchester. How would you, as president, propose to better engage student and associate non-members and put in place a sustainable and achievable growth plan? How would you relay the RIBA's value to those who feel the RIBA is useless, has failed them, and doesn't do much to actually advance our profession? So this time round, we're going to start with Valeria. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Well, as I said in my intro, this has been the purpose of my, the whole sole focus of my being VP membership. Listen to people, engage with members, whether they be national or international, especially with student and associate members who have been neglected in previous years. So how would I improve the connection and make sure that there is an offer? Well, we need to review the offer. Currently, the student and associate offer isn't good enough, but also we need to build, and we have started a review, and as VP membership, I will deliver that review. As president, could do a lot more. But also, we need to strengthen the connection that the students and associates have at local level, the regional office, decentralizing resources and allowing our the RIBA staff to connect with our students, to connect with you, and I'll enable you to understand how to best use the resources that RIBA should put in place for your benefit.
Thank you, Valeria.
Thank you.
We're moving on to Sumita. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you, Victoria, for your question. It's a really good question because not just students, there are other people who are leaving the RIBA. I know of tutors who leave the RIBA who are not members of the RIBA. So as you can see in my campaign video, I included students and associates in that video because I want my presidency to be that of engagement, and it's about someone like me and someone like you. And I've already said about how to diversify education, and make it more relevant to everybody, have different types of apprenticeships and flexible ways of studying. So we want to broaden and extend our access to everybody and have events within the RIBA that include students. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. We're over now to Simon. Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
When I was a student, I was never really interested in the RIBA. I was interested in architecture. I remain interested in architecture and the benefits of what design can bring to our society. To me, you're just the architects of the future, and your brief period of students is a kind of passage of time. My concern is that the RIBA won't attract people to join. As you said, it's seen as useless. I think it needs to become more accessible through affordable education. It needs to promote excellence, and it needs to become the house around which all architects gather, because it is an institute of ideas, an institute of design, and not one of inertia. That's why the RIBA needs you to come in and engage and build your future and build on the excellent career that architecture offers.
Thank you, Simon. Next, we're over to Jude. Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
In terms of better engaging, from my point of view, as students and associates, we're very much part of the profession at large. So in terms of RIBA and relevance, we need to be clear about what our purpose is. And, some of the things I mentioned earlier, that we talked very much at length about this in the members' husting about the climate emergency and the pandemic and public health. Rooting those things central to our purpose runs right the way through the start of your education to the end of your career. So making that clear and being very proactive and open and collegiate about the way in which we share information together is going to be key. We've seen so many changes recently in terms of how we communicate and the opportunities that bring, and taking that further and working with the Future Architects programme to really place that centre stage so that we can see what the RIBA is doing and we can all contribute towards it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. And last but not least, over to Nick. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
I think most members are disengaged. 80% of architects haven't been voting. Apathy is rife across the profession. And we can't let that carry on and happen with students and associate members. The RIBA need to focus on making or understanding why being an architect is worthwhile. So how do we overcome that apathy? I think we start on a member level regionally, whether you're qualified or student. You respond in an emotional response. As president of the Manchester Society of Architects, we recognise we had to change our approach and focus on rebuilding at grassroots level. Consequently, over the last 4 years, our engagement has gone up 800% from an incredibly diverse group of people, which has been held up by the last few presidents as a perfect example of how to overcome apathy. We just have to engage locally and let the RIBA get on with the good stuff, such as lobbying government for the bigger success of our profession.
Thank you to Nick as well. We're over now to the next question. Our next question comes from Hugo Lopez, who's a student member from Portugal. So Hugo's question is, what immediate changes will you make as president that align with our current climate crisis, both in practice and education? This time we'll start the questions with Sumita. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
So thank you, Hugo, for your question. It's lovely to hear from you. So as I said before, that one of the things we want to do is, as I said, my book has become recognized abroad and it deals with sustainable design and climate change. So I've already been teaching this subject for the last 30 years. So it's not something new for me. I come from India, which has been affected severely by climate crisis. And I know countries all over the world are being affected by climate crisis. So what I want to do is, for example, with students, I want to engage in promoting non-traditional architecture and participatory design projects. I want to support the curriculum in becoming more diverse and acknowledge climate change. So that thing is happening already. Some things are being written into it. I know, I've seen the document. So there are some good things happening. So while I'm president, I want to continue that path, and I've already been working in it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Samita. We're back over to Simon. Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you, Hugo. I teach and I practice. I don't really see a difference between the two. We are facing the same challenges. In many ways, as a student, I think you can push the profession with your research and your ambition. You are, after all, the future of the profession. As a practitioner, we have 4 full-time researchers. We're building half a dozen BREEAM outstanding buildings. We started 25 years ago with an idealised model school, work in the public and private sector. I am very optimistic that if we work together, garner the support of the rest of the industry and form a carbon alliance, we can become a powerful lobbying voice in government. We cannot do it alone. We've got to take our clients on a journey. So the RIBA can capture best practice, share it and promote it. Then people will listen, then we will make a difference.
Thank you, Simon. Our next speaker up is Jude. Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Thank you. What we know is that there have been people working for decades in the area in terms of championing climate change and addressing the issues. So my first action would be to make sure those people around the table, we've got ACAN, Architects Declare, CEDA, all of these organisations that have been pushing from the front, and make sure their voices are heard. And as a profession, what we also need to do is rapidly increase our skills in this area and raise awareness. So through the principles of, education and profession working together, there's a real opportunity to consider the principles of lifelong learning and partnership working to do that. And also, in the broadest sense of addressing the climate emergency, we need to take on board the issues that were raised in the ethics and sustainability report and commission to make sure that we're tackling that in a broad, holistic way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. We're over now to Nick. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Quite obviously, tackling the climate emergency should be the President's #1 priority. And I wholeheartedly support this. But I am approaching this with a different angle. Because we've become so marginalised, as it stands, we don't have the tools or influence to empower the kind of change, radical change that's needed. Change that goes beyond net zero carbon. When we have my new code of procurement, we'll have the influence to guide our clients along the right sustainable path with tools such as live carbon modelling and post-occupancy evaluation. Once we're no longer bullied by contractors into undermining our cause, we can achieve the aims of organisations like Architects Declare and continue some of the momentum the RIBA have started. I hope I can convince you that we'll be much more effective on this issue if we come from a position of strength and influence, rather than where we find ourselves at the moment. Otherwise, your passion could be wasted.
Thank you, Nick. And last but not least, Valeria, over to you. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Well, I would like to start with education. We know that our education system doesn't work. We need to reform it. But the first thing I would definitely do is to put the climate emergency at the heart of the architectural education. We need to teach our students how to design within planetary limits. That is absolutely paramount. At the same time, in practice, we have got, like some, I think Jude said, we have got activists, we've got a wealth of knowledge we can access, but we're not yet having all the profession understanding the importance of the 2030 climate challenge target. So we need to have a campaign of information. We need to take everybody with us. We are not going to achieve any changes unless we're all together and no one is left behind. From the biggest buildings to the house extension, they have to meet the target if we are to meet the requirement of the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Right, over to question number 5. So question number 5 comes from Adriana, who is an associate member from Chichester. Adriana's question is, architects have indeed needed to find new paths to become relevant as cultural, social, environmental, health and safety consultants or designers, but could easily be overtaken by new technologies or traditional procurement. How will you help redefine the traditional architect role so as our practice is relevant 30 years from now? This time we're going back to Simon. So Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds start now.
There's a sense of, often in these situations, a sense of gloom and doom. I have a huge amount of respect for the architects of the future. I'm absolutely certain that the education of architecture is a great education. You don't need to be an architect, but you may well choose to be one. You are taught to design, you are taught to write, you are taught to think, you're taught about physics, you're talking about the environment. So to me, the RIBA should help you construct our future and your career. It shouldn't be a defensive thing. Architects can lead the construction industry. We can lead on climate change. We are good collaborators. We are good at consulting. We are good at listening. So don't be afraid. Don't be downhearted. You can make the career you want to make, whether it is as an architect, as a filmmaker, or another within the construction industry. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Simon. Next, we're over back to Jude. Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you. Well, in terms of new models and new paths to be resilient and cope for the future, the role of the architect, I think, needs to be communicated effectively, because at the moment, I don't think we get that message fully across. Our ability to think holistically, to make connections, to collaborate, to open up issues and challenge them is key. And I think the future of architecture is making sure that what we do is for people and meets the needs of society rather than something that happens to people. So I think taking an interdisciplinary approach to working in a collaborative way, to applying our skills that look at ways to decarbonize our actions, to look at ways that think about ecosystems, biodiversity, infrastructure, not just physical, but social infrastructure, and thinking in very broad way is possibly how I think the architect's role might go in future. And I'm really interested to develop that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. We're back to Nick. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Well, I am concerned about the future, and I don't think that is me being pessimistic. It's being a realist, and I think we've reached a tipping point for the profession. And my practice is relatively young. I'm not at the end of my career. I want a future just as much for me as I want for you, and I am concerned because we have the skills and we can give the value. But we have to change the way we work. We have to focus on our talent for the benefit of the world, but allow us to actually have the ability to solve the problems. I feel so hamstrung in a profession that I love, and I want the future architects listening here to join me and realize we have a major problem in what is stopping us from doing our job. Only by reforming the method of our employment will we have this influence. We've got to come in from the sidelines and actually really showing our worth.
Thank you, Nick. We're over now to Valeria. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Thank you, Adriana. I think it's a very important question, but we don't need to be so pessimistic. Yes, challenges ahead, but technology cannot replace creativity. I think the pandemic has shown us that we can make full use of technology to connect, collaborate, participate in a way that we thought was impossible before. We need to use all these new ways of working to our advantage. Mastering the green economy that will be coming from the result of the awareness about the climate emergency could be a way that architects could use their talent and lead in the construction industry. The emerging digital opportunity, again, shouldn't be seen as enemies, but as way of better interact and collaborate. Our profession is changing. It doesn't mean it's changing for the worse. And yes, the RIBA has a moral obligation to show the importance of good architecture, of the using architects and the benefit that can bring. But let's be optimistic.
Thank you, Valeria. We're back over to, last but not least, Sumita to answer this question. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Thanks very much, Adriana. Really important question, which I actually answered in my book. There's a whole chapter about it, about the future of architects. And the thing is that I'm not a pessimist, I'm an optimist. And there are two things that are happening right now, which you can see that there are different ways of practicing architecture, and I personify that. I do 6 different things, and there are different things that an architect can do, which is part of our education, the other way is that, we were discussing this thing. I work as a non-exec in the NHS, and we were thinking, would the role of doctors be reduced by robots doing surgery? No, because you need the skills of empathy, the soft skills. So similar way, with architects, you need soft skills, you need creativity, you need dialogue. Those things cannot be replaced by anyone. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you very much. Right, we're now going to move to another question. This question comes from Murat Mirzadeh, apologies for the pronunciation, who's a student member from Baku. So Murat's question is, what immediate changes will you make as president that will affect the future of the RIBA student members? This time we're back round to Jude. So Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Thank you. Well, firstly, our immediate role is going to be as president-elect. So there's a year before we actually become president. So in that time, what I would do is I'd be working with the Future Architect Group and seeing really what the key challenges are right now and how we might address them in that period. I think also for me, some of the key changes would be is looking at how practice and academia could work together to better learn from one another. For example, the Anthropocene Architecture School have been educating our practice in terms of how we might change our skills. So that reciprocal relationship is something I would work on. And also within the universities and themselves and the pathways into education, I would look at making sure those were as open and as accessible as possible so that we could diversify and increase inclusivity within our practice at large, within our profession.
Thank you, Jude. We're back now to Nick. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
I'm gonna come back on people saying I'm not negative, I'm not positive. There's no point being fanciful. Architects have to live in the real world. I want to talk about the elephant in the room, because if practices aren't healthy, we can't do this good stuff. The business model of architecture is becoming increasingly difficult. Maybe it's because procurement is seen as boring, a little bit geeky, it's missed, but you're not taught this stuff at university. But it's crippling our ability to engage, it's crippling our ability to give value, it's crippling our ability to do all the good things that we want. I want a profession which will be seen as an exemplar within the country, and we can do that. And by working with future architects, I see you as the future. But I want to give you something where you can actually gain employment. We can discuss all the other issues on and on, but if you can't find employment, it will be all for nothing. We have to get real.
Thank you, Nick. We're back now to Valeria. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
First of all, hi, it's great to see that international students are connecting and interested in this debate. So thank you so much. My first thing is that We need to make sure that the resources that already exist, and in particular the RIBA Future Architect, is maintained. We're coming to the end of the pilot. We need to have this extended and increased. We need to give more resources, more power, so that the RIBA can connect with the students where they are and when they need it. The resources provided by the network has been incredible. The other thing is decentralizing the resources, and that can happen internationally as well as nationally. We need to help students where they are. There are lots of things that your students need. Right now, we cannot, as a RIBA, we're failing you. We cannot help you in what you need us to do. So helping you connect, facilitating collaboration, facilitating being listened to is what we need to do. And this is what I'll do as president. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, back over to Sumita. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Thanks so much, Murad, coming in from Baku. It's lovely to hear from you. So the immediate things, as I mentioned before, I want to do is diversify architectural education. So it is not currently suitable for a number of global, around the globe, for people who are studying architecture. I want to celebrate diversity through exhibition and talks. I want practices to have equal opportunities policies. And I would like RIBA jobs to offer jobs based on skills match, which will offer greater prospects to many of our students, rather than, what we're having, the system we have at the moment. And as I mentioned before, online RIBA platform for project and people sharing across local, regional and international networks and for different sizes of practice. So even if you're living in Baku, you could work in a project in London or somewhere else. And I'd love to see that kind of collaboration happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. Last but not least, to answer the question is Simon. Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
We're all students of architecture. It never stops. The RIBA has invented some artificial things called Part 1 and Part 2 and Part 3. Our office is populated by people who haven't qualified, people who come from other countries with different qualifications. There are 40 nationalities. They are all, to me, acting as architects. And that's what it's all about, recognizing that it's a lifelong journey which you can enjoy and where you can make a difference, a social difference. Immediate short-term things, I think you should increase the RIBA Student Bursary and Hardship Fund. In terms of education, we need to get a kind of earn and learn. The RIBA needs to open that up, the new kinds of models. And when you get into the profession, through apprenticeship, earn and learn or traditional, you should enter offices that pay you properly and look after you. And to do that, they need to be given the power by the RIBA to lobby government to make sure architecture has a voice. It is a highly valuable skill.
Thank you very much, Simon, as well. So we're able to take one more last question. This question is coming from Caitlin MacLeod, who's a student member from Edinburgh. So Caitlin's question is, there is a mental health crisis in architectural education. What do you plan to do to encourage healthier working practices within our architecture schools and the wider profession? So this time we're going to start with Nick Moss. Nick, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Mental health has occurred, in my opinion, due to the pressure being heaped on graduating students. We have an inherent belief in our profession that we're perhaps not as valuable or as worthy as I think we are, which then plays out into terrible salaries. I believe terrible salaries come from low fees, and they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's going to put more and more pressure on architects, especially young architects, to do more, to work harder, and to justify stupidly their terrible, terrible salaries. Hence why we need to change the structural problem. We have to change the way we work to allow us to move up the value chain. We have to show our value, which I think we can really demonstrate. We still have the skills, but we need to do this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. We're now back to Valeria. Valeria, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Well, one word for me would be to stop aggressive crits in education, which had been over and over again highlighted as one of the main reasons why a lot of women and students, vulnerable students, abandon the idea of a career in architecture. We have a system that is geared up for male and predominantly white background practice. We need to move away from that. Inclusivity starts at university, and inclusivity means a kinder, more inclusive way of relating to students. Again, I believe that mentoring schemes are incredibly useful. Having more access to mentors would really benefit all students that are going through education and find it very difficult. And we may be able to retain the talent that is currently lost to our profession. Working hours within the profession, we have to insist that there is a healthy life-work balance. Is a culture that must stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Next to answer is Sumita. Sumita, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for your question. So I wanted to come in as a trustee of Architects Benevolent Society, and we offer mental health support, and we have been doing it for several years for students who've studied at least 1 year in the UK. And we have an extensive program that you can access. We've produced a booklet that I've actually publicized amongst my students. I'm really aware of the mental stress that students are going through. I'm very, very sympathetic. It's not an easy time to be a student at the moment. The other thing I've mentioned is there are several well-being schemes that are coming up. Please join those, find out about those, or ask me. I can point you in the right direction. The other thing, obviously, is the gender pay gap and the ethnicity pay gap and various pay gaps that we have, which leads to financial difficulties among students, and that's also becoming a problem. So we need to look at equal opportunities for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. Next is Simon. Simon, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
There's a kind of campaign of badge of honour where you do an all-night as a student and it goes on through your career. I've never really believed in that. The wisest tutor I ever had, she told me that, you know, don't do architecture in the daytime, it's too boring. We all love architecture and we are all fascinated by it, but you have to learn to stand up for yourself and actually realise that having a social life, having friends, having a family, living in the city that you live in and looking around and learning will make you a better architect. Then you can take that attitude into the profession and then you can break that model. In our practice, we don't encourage that because we don't think it makes good architecture. Architecture needs to be involved in the theatre of everyday life. So of course, as a teacher and a practitioner, I want to support you, but you know, you need to take responsibility and realise that you'll be a better designer, better contributor to society if you give yourself the chance to break away from architecture.
Thank you, Simon. And last but not least, to answer the final question is Jude. Jude, please unmute yourself. Your 60 seconds begin now.
Thank you for that important question. We all know that it's important to be healthy to perform well, and we've talked today about public health and the health of our planet and such like. So it's good to see that it is growing awareness, you know, in workplaces and in education about the need, you know, to have good physical health and mental health. But this does need to go further. For example, in schools of architecture, I think, you know, studio culture, working hours, deadlines needs to be reviewed. The review process itself and the student voice need to be stronger. In practice, we talked earlier about the pressure, financial pressure, which is also a challenge in education. If there's a lot of financial pressure, that puts a huge challenge on our mental health. And also that in practice, having mental health first aiders, support groups, flexible working, all the things that we promote in our practice, we found to significantly alleviate pressure in that area. And the Architects Benevolent Society in particular are doing incredible work in that, and would really recommend looking at their resources. They're really fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the question time. Thank you to all the candidates, and thank you to all of you who have attended the event today. We hope this has been useful and provides you with some good insights when you cast your vote. Just a couple of reminders. So voting opens on the 14th of July and closes on the 4th of August. If you'd like to view the election statements and videos, go to the Civica Election Services webpage. Please remember that in order to vote, you need to ensure that the email address given on your membership record is up to date in order to receive the voting email from Civica. If you have any questions or need support, please do not hesitate to contact the RIBA elections team by phone or email on elections@riba.org. Thank you again and stay safe. Goodbye.